The Dragon Dawn DLC introduces 5 key new things to Age of Wonders 4, starting of course with the new Dragon Lord hero type. It also introduces 2 mixed new tomes of magic, an interesting realm with some powerful dragons within, and of course, the lizard men. In this video I'm going to break down those 5 key categories, not just so you'll have a better understanding of the DLC, but also to get you battle ready. With our YouTube housekeeping out of the way, let's roll! First up, we have the Dragon Lords, and by default, if you didn't want to make your own for whatever reason, you could choose one of the 2 that are included in the game, or alternatively, this, Lizard Folk instead. We'll get to them in a little bit later in the video though, so let's focus for now on the Dragon Lords themselves. As we hover over them, you'll notice that they also have something that makes them a little bit different, the fact that they have an affinity connection. This one here is a Chaos Dragon, so it deals fire damage, whereas this other one here is an Astral Dragon, instead dealing lightning damage. But there's more customization than just that. That is at relatively surface level to what the Dragon Lords actually offer. One of the most significant steps is this, the Ruler's Origin. Now, of course, we're all familiar with the 2 that were already in the game. Champions, who tend to focus on money and diplomacy. Then we have Godia, the Wizard Kings, who are obviously focused around spells and mana. And now we have a third category, Dragon Lord. Dragon Lords come with their own unique twists and flair. Their focus primarily is about combat and the battlefield, and that's what distinguishes them from the other 2. You'll notice when we hover over them a bit that they have this Dragon Hoard ability, which is a way to make money off items that you're not using in your arsenal. Things like swords that you might find from, say, taking down a wonder. Dragon Lords also come with a slight debuff, that they have a 30 gold unit upkeep at the start of the game, and of course they can't equip a lot of hero items because they are literally dragons. So there's a little bit of a debuff here at the beginning to balance out their strength. And of course, dragons have access to powerful hero skills and transformations, and that is what really sets them apart and makes them more battlefield combat focused. And of course, there are a huge number of ways that you can customize your dragon, just like you can with any other type of leader or species in the game, from its wing size, neck length, the pose, of course, that it stands over its people, you name it, it's here. The crucial thing, though, is up the top, where you'd normally select a weapon. This is where you select your affinity alignment, and just as we discussed earlier, the affinity alignment affects the kind of damage that you'll deal. Will it be physical damage? Will it be blight damage? Spirit or frost? Of course, each affinity aligns with a different type, and the type that you select will also add an affinity point up the top, meaning that of course that'll contribute to things like the development tree, crucially. The dragons themselves stand fierce and tall on the battlefield and in the map, and when you go into their overview you'll notice that they have of course their dragon claw equipped, that's their primary weapon. They also bring a few other things to the table, perhaps most notably is Draconic Rage. When this unit's total hit points reach 60% or lower, it starts to deal an extra 30% damage, and that's on top of all of the other things that it already brings to the table. These are easily the most powerful heroes that you'll find. It's perhaps through leveling up the dragons that you'll really start to notice their most significant strengths though. Hero skills of course have changed in this update. They are slightly easier to earn. Instead of occurring every 5 levels, they now occur every 4. But dragons bring something a little bit more special to the table. At the 4th and 12th unlock, you'll be able to, instead of choosing one of the traditional signature skills, instead lean into an affinity even more. Take, let's say, Materium Aspect, for example. It will increase my critical hit chance by 30% and give me +2 defense, as well as adding that Materium affinity point so that I can start to level up my Materium branch of the tree perhaps a little bit faster. Nature Aspect provides extra hit points. Order gives you faithful, status resistance, and condemns the enemy. Shadow Aspect gives you soul drain, reducing unit morale and applying soulbound and 30% extra damage against those low morale units. All of these effects are very strong, and of course they're worthwhile just to begin with because of the alignment with the affinity. They'll also, let's say I choose the Chaos Aspect here, affect the look of my dragon too. So they're not just purely, say, affinity or Materium or whatever it might be aligned benefits. They also have a cosmetic effect on the dragon too. At the signature skill level 8 and 16, you'll find generally some slightly more familiar skills for you to lean into. Things like, for example, the always usually good summon animal. The other part of the skill set for dragons is their special skills. Normally, of course, we can go for this kind of thing, right? Fighting 1, defense 1, and dragons can still do that too, or support abilities, which are equally very strong. But dragons bring this first class, a class of their own, and these benefits are fantastic. Right from the beginning, we see focusing in on hit points, on defense, heightened senses, and additional attacks as well. So for example, here's Tail Swipe. I could put a point into that if I wanted to, and now of course it's unlocking a little bit more. Now I can get a Dragon's Breath ability. This one has an incredible sort of cone effect, so here it'll deal damage to all units in a 3-hex cone, or we could go for the line effect instead, and this one will blast through 5 tiles, dealing 28 blight damage. For example, it was the one that I decided to pick up in my Let's Play. You can also get benefits like this, where you get an extra, say, 10 knowledge for being a governor. You could lean into that a little bit more, stack it high, make it fly, and as you go through, you'll start to notice the same things occurring again. Here I have Tail Bash, so I can boost my tail attack even more, or if you want to, just swallow an enemy whole. These abilities are very powerful, and again, to reiterate, it's what sets the dragons apart from the rest, among, of course, a few other things like their draconic rage. And as we've discussed earlier, these guys really are the combat heroes, if you will, the battlefield heroes, rather than the diplomats or the mana gatherers. And you can see that by, say, Thelma here, who in this footage is at level 8, so she's about halfway through. She's got a lot of different attacks, some of them granted thanks to little things that she might be holding on to, but for the most part, it is pure dragon abilities that she's dealing. Let's take Dragon's Breath. Sure, she's not quite in the best position, she's moved as far as she can, and she's going to make the first strike in a fight. To demonstrate it just a little bit, Dragon's Breath pierces through the enemies, smashing 5 tiles in front of her. These abilities are really unseen in most other classes, and so obviously I would encourage you to use your Dragon Lords in the fight. Because they have an extra cost early on with that 30 upkeep, you'll want to make sure that they're generating revenue in other ways, whether that's through their abilities of having items in your arsenal that you're not using, or on the battlefield. Now let's talk Lizard Folk. So Lizard Folk is the new physical form that's been introduced to Age of Wonders 4 Dragon Dawn. They start with traits Poisonous and Cold-Blooded. And while Cold-Blooded might not be new, the Poisonous trait is, and as you can see, it leads into the blight damage effect, adding an extra 2, and melee attackers have a 30% chance of becoming poisoned. So you've got about exactly a 3 in 10 chance of also causing this sustained blight damage. So that obviously there's a focus with these people around blight. Again, there is a default faction if you'd like to play as them. Here you can see the Lizard Folk and all of the things that they bring to the table. But another important thing to consider is if you want to have a leader who is Lizard Folk, like this faction, then you can't select Dragon Lord, because if you select Dragon Lord, of course, you'll end up with a dragon. So if you want to play purely as a lizard with a lizard leader to begin with, then you'll need to make sure you're either champion or god ear. And of course, again, there are plenty of different customizations options for you to dig into, changing perhaps the look of the exact type of lizard that you are. Maybe you want to be more of a chameleon, or maybe something a bit larger and more aggressive. Ultimately, the design is down to you. There are 2 new tomes of magic that the DLC pack introduces, and for the first time in the official game, as you can see by taking a look at the Tome of Evolution here, these ones give us access to 2 different branches of the tree. Both of them are technically under the nature category in the Tome library, and they both deliver 1 nature affinity and 1 chaos affinity as well. Now, if you play on PC and you've played some of the excellent mods that are available, this may not be new to you, but it's important to note that this is really the first time that console players have gained access to tomes that stretch across multiple affinities. Either way, though, it's a significant step away from the traditional design. Now, I've had a chance to test basically everything inside of these tomes of magic now, so I can deliver a bit more of a considered view on them. Let's break them down quickly and share some interesting things about them. Firstly, of course, the Tome of Evolution starts off with a healing buff spell. Fairly straightforward. Heals for temporary hit points, gains strength, and the crucial thing here is that it focuses around this evolve factor. The effect is actually doubled if the unit that you're healing can evolve. Evolving, of course, being, well, the description tells it quite well. The unit will transform into a more powerful unit when it reaches champion rank. So once you level up, get some experience, you'll evolve, change your physical form, become stronger. And there are 2 examples of units like that inside of the tome. Both of these units can evolve. The first is a Slither Hatchling, and the second is the Wyvern Fledgling. This is, of course, a summoning spell, so you'll be focusing more around mana and spells, whereas the Hatchling can be trained inside of your cities. So there's more of a gold focus here. And the synergies just keep going within the Tome of Evolution. We have Draconic Vitality, a minor race transformation. Really great to get one of these online from your first tome. This one gives your units +3 hit points per rank. So, of course, the more ranked up they are, maybe they're an evolved unit, for example, they're going to be getting a lot more hit points. And then the second thing, maybe better, but either way, both of them are pretty good in my opinion, is a unit enchantment. Inside of this tome, it's called Rapid Evolution Enchantment. It gives +20% experience from combat. Great synergy there with our sort of war focus. And Resurgence, if they are tier 1 or 2. And this is particularly spicy, by the way. It makes them come back to life if they die in combat where their army was victorious. So maybe your relatively weak, young Slither Hatchlings that, let's be real, could perish in a fight because they're fairly fresh, fairly new, can now come back to life after the fight if they perish. Very strong. It, of course, only affects units that evolve. Potentially not a downside, considering you've picked up 2 of them within the tome. And, of course, there are plenty of others that could do it as well, that already exist inside of nature. Plenty of animals, spiders, etc. And then we have the namesake of it all, Tome of Dragons, unlocked at tier 3. And, of course, as we've already mentioned, sharing that a dual affinity, nature and chaos. This one has a lot more to offer, though. You'll notice on the right-hand side here, its initial bonus is quite different. Of course, it unlocks seeds because it's at tier 3. Important to note, you'll get access to 2 different ones. And it also has this special improvement, which I'm actually quite a fan of. This is the Wyvern Eyrie. It grants 10 knowledge, 5 draft if you're adjacent to a farm, and an additional 5 for each extra farm. It also crucially unlocks the ability to build Wyvern units, and these units change depending on whether you're positively aligned or negatively aligned. It counts as a research post too, so it ticks a lot of boxes. You'll also get access to the Firebomb skill. This one might be especially useful for dragons who are leaning into the fire, the chaos affinity, maybe slightly less so than others, but actually it'll all come together and make sense once we look at what's unlocked inside of the tome. There are synergies here too. Okay, so how does it all come together? Well, Flame of Focus, the unit enchantment, will give Firebomb, that magic attack that we were just talking about, to, as you can see, our battle units, our battle mage units. Okay, decent. Then we have Dragon Attack, the only siege project that's on offer inside of the DLC. This one, as you can see, deals 26 fire damage to defending units and has a 9 out of 10 chance of burning them. Plenty of flames on offer. Speaking of flames, we have another healing spell, Purifying Flame. Quite similar to the earlier one, though it won't double on an evolve effect. In this case, it does remove negative status effects, though, so it's quite a useful spell. As we get more towards the top, things start to get particularly spicy. Here we have Young dragons that you can train and fight. They are a tier 3 fighter unit. And as we were talking about earlier, the kind of affinity that you have can influence the kind of dragons that are on offer. A negative and evil alignment will unlock obsidian dragons, whereas a positive good alignment will unlock golden dragons instead. By default, you'll gain access to young fire dragons and young frost dragons, and of course, they can also evolve, so there's some synergies going back through to the first tome. And then, my favorite piece of the puzzle, Draconian Transformation, turns the target race into Draconians, granting them the dragon unit type. And that gives them Draconic Rage, which, as we were talking about earlier, when their hit points are below 60%, they deal an extra, a whopping extra, by the way, 30% damage. Woof. All of your people now can be dragons. They also have natural regeneration, just adding more fuel on the fire, healing 10% of their hit points as temporary hit points at the end of the turn in combat, so long as it doesn't go above the normal amount of HP that they'd have, and healing 10 hit points at the start of your turn on the world map. so these dragons regenerate faster, whether it's in the fight or outside of it. And finally, of course, a nice little bit of synergy because there's been a lot of flames inside of this tome. Units sustaining 8 fire damage won't matter to you because you're immune to burning. It's a relatively powerful one, of course. It's very strong, but also it's quite expensive. And when it comes to actually what does the transformation look like, well, I've seen mixed reviews online about how people feel about it. I've seen some comments that it's not quite dragon enough. The basic changes, as you can see, are horns on the head, spikes on the limbs, and then these sort of a little bit holy, but they're there, wings on their back. It's applied to your lizards, obviously by far and away the best one here, and as you can see also on the heroes too. So here's Kai Thundermaw from my Let's Play series, looking pretty cool, combination of lizard and dragon. And the fifth and final main consideration for the DLC, the sort of meaty bit of content, is actually a realm, Scars of the Ashen War. What does it deliver? Well, a couple of things. If we have a look at it here, obviously you can see the story for it is that there's a realm in flux, dominated by dragons. There's heaps of them, spawned in its creation. Tending to its growth, a schism has formed between the dragons, bringing about a conflict known as the Ashen War. Now, a lot of the traits here, of course, are fairly normal, like Coast. The one that's most important, and it's the namesake, Ashen War. Essentially what this is saying is that there's a group called the Dawn Wardens. They start in an alliance, they're all dragons of course, and they're at war with the Reshapers. The Reshapers, also a group of dragons, start in an alliance and they're fighting against the Dawn Wardens. The challenge is that each Elder Dragon has a special ability, one that we can't get, one that we can't unlock. It's quite specialized and very interesting. Whoever forms an alliance with all of the Elder Dragons, or forms an alliance with all members of either alliance and defeats each member of the opposing one, is victorious inside of this realm. There are plenty of fun, flavoursome things inside of the realm, including, of course, that it's all driven by this story of two warring factions. And almost right at the start of the game, you'll be offered a quest where you essentially choose a side. You don't have to come in as a dragon to fight with the dragons. You could come in as a human if you wanted to, or you could choose to take no side. Ultimately, it's up to you. It's a pretty interesting and involved story realm, and obviously plenty of dragon lore to uncover. When it comes to exactly how it plays, you'll notice that when you open up the quests, there is this Pantheon quest. And this is, of course, the story that we're talking about earlier, how you need to either defeat or form an alliance with the dragons, who themselves have their own interconnecting alliances, 2 groups of 3. As you explore the world, you'll also run into other players, so you're not alone in this journey. And finally, you'll notice that the dragons themselves start with very powerful and threatening cities. Here we have the Cradle of Integrity, for example, and then over this side, we have Eternal Grove. They're big, strong cities with lots of tiles, and negotiating with them may not necessarily always go your way, so take care. There are a lot of powerful enemies in this world, and most of them are dragons and they're pretty hungry. Now, I've already completed a full Let's Play on my channel. If you'd like to see how all of this plays out from the early, mid, and late game, it's right there. Shameless plug. And that brings us to the end of the video. This one was potentially quite a bit more involved for me than others, so I'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button or something on the way out. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.